Okay, so I'm with National Public Radio. In a lot of ways, the name says it all. National Public Radio. We're national in our scope, serving the United States. We're public in that we're serving the citizens of the United States in the public interest with journalism and storytelling. And radio. At our roots, we're a radio company. And in a lot of ways, you could say radio really hasn't changed since the dawn of broadcasting. It's still information sent out over electromagnetic waves, through the air into people's radios, in their homes, their cars, and their offices. And this is how most listeners to the 270 member stations that we work with get our shows. Mostly we're known for news shows like All Things Considered and Morning Edition, which are kind of news magazines, a number of different stories, one after another after another. And for weekend comedy quizzes like Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. But in recent years, we've really been trying to reinvent radio because technology has changed, in fact, and we want to make sure we're there on the modern platforms with the information that our audience is desiring. But it's really easy to kind of think, radio has endured for all of these years. Do we really, as a radio company, need to be chasing the next shiny piece of technology that comes down the path? Because there has been a lot of technological shift over the past decades. As the tech companies explain, there really have been major shifts in computing technologies every 10 years. From mainframe computers in 1977, to desktops in 87, to the internet in 97, to mobile devices in 2007, and smart speakers in 2017. And each one of these shifts have radically changed how we work, how we communicate, how we get our information, and frankly have changed how we live our lives. And in the early days of these technological shifts, as a radio company, we're thinking, wow, this really doesn't play to our strengths. Most of the early technological shifts were very much about things you do on screens, stories you read, videos we watch. And it kind of left us trying to scramble to catch up in the digital age and figure out, how can we have more written stories? What can we do with video? And this was hard because we're a radio company at core. But these last two shifts have been more in our wheelhouse. In 2007, mobile devices, those smartphones we walk around with all the time, ushered in podcasts. And in 2017, smart speakers, voice assistants, ushered in an era of talking to devices and getting audio content back. And these two shifts really got our attention because this is what we do. We do audio storytelling. And smart speakers really got our attention because the adoption curve of smart speakers was starting to resemble that of smartphones. And every single one of you, I'm sure, has a smartphone in your pocket. In the United States, we were seeing smart speakers really take off, and I mean really. Between 2017 and 2018, there was a 78% increase. 78% increase in 1 year in the number of households that had smart speakers. 21, and actually we just got new numbers, it's actually 23% of Americans now have a smart speaker in their home. And many of them own more than one device. And they're not just using them to ask Alexa to burp or to say, hey, Google, tell me a joke. They're using them to do a lot of the things we as a radio company and as what radio stations were really known for and relied upon for. Playing music, getting the weather. What time is it even? Morning zoo shows in the United States. That's where people get their jokes. Sports updates. And two things that were really central to what we do, news and actually listening to radio stations. And we know they're listening. 25% of listening, streaming listening that is, to public radio stations in the United States is now happening on voice assistant platforms. That's pretty substantial. And this meant we started to get really serious about what is our strategy as new technologies come to the forefront. In some ways, we've really done all of these three with each new technological shift, but we kind of formalized it when we started to move into the space of mobile phones and smart speakers. First, we wanted to make sure that the content that we're known to and the content that our audience relies on is actually available on these new devices. Second, how do we experiment with the capability of these new devices? Each type of technology does something a little bit different, a little bit new, and it has some inherent capabilities. How do we use them? And then how do we not just use them, but how do we truly become a market leader in our use of them? How do we innovate? How do we create new ways of reaching audiences? So this is really the mindset that we went into the voice landscape with. And so first, as I mentioned, we started with getting the things we're known for onto smart speakers.
If you have access to a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR. All the latest news, all the standout podcasts, all the captivating stories. Just ask your smart speaker.
Play NPR.
Live from NPR News in Washington.
You can also stream your local NPR station anywhere in the country, no matter where you live. It's all there, waiting to inform and entertain, so you can activate all our voices with yours.
So we really wanted to make sure our content was easily available, with easy-to-remember utterances, because that's one of the challenges with smart speakers. How do you remember what to say to it? So we really tried to coalesce around that idea of play. Play NPR, play Michigan Radio, play Planet Money, one of our podcasts, so that it's very easy for people to ask for a station stream, the news, or a podcast. And so how did this work out? Well, podcasts was a little lackluster, honestly, on voice assistants. It's kind of hard, given that many of the devices, and this is changing fast, and we'll get to this in a second, many of the devices don't have screens. And a lot of choosing a podcast is really based on looking at artwork and looking at episode titles and names of podcasts. That's kind of how you decide what you're going to listen to. That's kind of hard when you just have to ask the smart speaker something. And sometimes Alexa or Google gets it right, and sometimes they give you something else back that kind of has a similar name to a podcast, but is really like a piece of music or something else. So that was, so-so. There's some listening, but not a lot. Our newscasts, on the other hand, are proving extremely popular on smart speakers. Lots of listening to the newscasts happening. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of listening to station streams. And for many of the public radio member stations, which are independently owned and operated across the United States, they're thinking, great, our stream is on a smart speaker. We're done, we got a smart speaker strategy. And a lot of commercial broadcasters in the United States are thinking, all right, I got my station on a smart speaker as a skill. We're done. This technology's taken care of. And we're kind of like, not so fast. Because in a lot of ways, with streams, we're probably just at the transitional beginning. Every time there is a new technology, you take the old and you put it on the new. Remember the dawn of radio. You probably don't remember it, but you've probably read about it. Everybody took stage plays and put them on the radio. When the internet came out, we took the front page of newspapers and we made them the home page if we were a newspaper. The same way radio stations are taking station streams and putting them on smart speakers. Because yeah, a smart speaker can kind of act like a radio, and they're showing up in people's lives in many of the places where radios once were, but there's so much more they can do. And I think we have all learned from Netflix and YouTube that you kind of expect to control your content. So how much longer is it really going to feel satisfactory on a device that's inherently interactive to come in mid-word, mid-sentence, mid-story, mid-show on a radio station stream? That's not really a satisfactory experience ultimately. It's one of the reasons we started making our big morning show, Morning Edition, available on demand, so listeners could get a replay of their local station broadcast of Morning Edition. But even that doesn't have the ability to skip if there's a story that you're just not interested in. And this is where one of our efforts to reinvent radio, called NPR One, merged with the work we're doing on smart speakers. NPR One was really started as a response to smartphones. Smartphones were kind of acting like almost transistor radios. People were carrying them around as they went about their lives. And they had inherent interactivity, and we were trying to figure out how do we make something that is kind of akin to radio, but would feel more native on a smart speaker. So we created a localized, personalized, continuous feed of newscasts, stories, and podcasts that were available at a touch of a button. So as you watch the short video, think about how what we were doing with NPR One might have applications in the smart speaker world.
It's 9:03 a.m. You can already tell it's going to be one of those mornings. So you turn on the NPR One app.
It's NPR One.
And hear a stream of hand-picked stories that adapts to what you like. You keep on listening because you hear another story you love. Then another. And another. Which means your favorite morning show lasts as long as you want it to.
So kind of master of the obvious, right? Here's an algorithmically controlled stream of content that's personalized. It learns what you listen to and what you like. It's localized. It's giving you news about the community you live in. It's continuous. It goes on and on and on. And it's controllable. You can skip. You can rewind. If your kid walks in the room, you can stop it and pick up exactly where you left off, something you can't do with radio. So we realized that what we had been working on for mobile devices made a lot of sense in the smart speaker universe. And in a lot of ways, it really is almost a perfect experience for voice assistant. So much so that Google's new News Assistance experience that is in beta right now has been compared, yay, to NPR One many times, because this is really the right kind of experience for a smart speaker. And Amazon kind of thought the same thing too. Amazon was really starting to think about what comes after the world of flash briefings, where you could set up, like, I want, this news update or this little comedy minute, and kind of set up your own little queue of things you might want to listen to. But what they were finding was that people were only setting up a couple of them, and they wanted people listening more. So they were working with media outlets to create more continuous listening flows of content. And we said, hey, we would like to use our NPR One feed to feed what we're doing for your long-form news listening experience. And so now, for new users to Amazon devices, when they ask for the news, Alexa says, where should I get your news? You can say NPR, CNN, Fox News, or Bloomberg. And if a person says NPR, Alexa says, welcome to NPR. To add local news to today's stories, please tell me your zip code. It's a postal code in the States. And once they give their postal code, anytime afterwards when they ask Alexa, Alexa, what's the news? They get a feed of news from NPR that's powered by the algorithm, the technical system services that we have to power NPR One, and the editorial workflow that's behind NPR One. And that gives the listener a localized, continuous flow of newscasts from NPR, from their local station, stories from NPR, and stories from their local station. So basically, this system of editorial workflows and the algorithm has set us up to create an endless variety of editorial products. We're working right now with Samsung to make it possible for users of the Samsung devices to ask NPR to play the news, or to play political stories, or to play a break from the news and get kind of water cooler stories, or any number of different types of stories. They then get back from the NPR One systems 3 stories followed by a continuous listening flow. During the midterm elections in the States, we enabled, using the NPR One systems again, listeners to ask NPR for an election update.
Ask NPR One to catch me up on the elections.
This is your midterm election update recorded at 9:07 p.m. Eastern Time. Polls are closing at this hour in more than a dozen states from the Great...
So the election update. The Samsung choose kind of your own adventure. What do you want to listen to? The continuous flow on the Alexa long-form news, and what you still get in the NPR One app. All different editorial experiences powered by the same infrastructure, the same algorithm, and the same editorial workflow. And this really enables us to create listening experiences for apps, for websites, for voice assistants, and even for like refrigerators and all the different devices that now have voice assistant technologies and the ability to play back content when you ask it for something. But there were some other things we needed to think about as we worked to reinvent radio. It used to be that clock radios and radios sat on kitchen counters and on nightstands next to beds. And now it's more our mobile phones and smart speakers, things that kind of have screens. In our research, we're finding that more and more people now have smart speakers in their houses that have screens. 30% of them do. And gosh, we're a radio company. We hadn't really thought much about our visual presence until smart speakers ended up with screens, and we kind of lost our default position as the newscast provider on some of the manufacturers' platforms the moment they put screens on their devices, because they wanted a default provider that had a visual newscast. So we realized we really, as a radio company, seriously needed to up our visuals game. But, we are a radio company. We're not CNN. We don't send out camera crews with every single reporter on every single story. We don't have B-roll, lying around the newsroom. So it was a challenge to kind of think about if we were to start providing a visual treatment of our newscast 24/7, what would that be and what would that look like? So we started with some user research to try to find out how people really think about these screens that are on their smart devices. And what we found was they're really not looking to focus in on them like they would a television show. It was really a secondary screen experience, something to give them a little bit of context, a little supplementary information, a little bit of visual information. And we're like, great, then maybe we don't have to 24/7 be doing these big produced newscasts. So we started out for some of the non-peak hours when, there's some listening, but it's not like our huge peak in listening on voice platforms, with what we call the Npr Cat. We know public radio listeners in the United States are kind of cat people. So we created this visual animation that goes along with our newscasts, has some movement, kind of is atmospheric, a little bit of companion functionality. The trees change with the seasons, the light changes with the time of day, and we have this during our non-prime hours, just to give a little visual interest. But during drive time in the morning, we actually produce a full-blown visual newscast that's produced by our newscast team and a new visuals team we added.
Coming up, the latest on the impeachment inquiry. And the Justice Department is weighing in on an investigation of the president's business practices. Good morning, I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News. Here are today's top stories. The former special representative to Ukraine is to testify behind closed doors this hour on Capitol Hill. Former envoy Kurt Volker was mentioned in a whistleblower's complaint. The complaint was about President Trump's July phone call to the president of Ukraine, in which he urged the Ukrainian leader to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden. NPR's Mara Eliason says the complaint prompted the impeachment inquiry by Congress.
The president has always tried to appear to be cooperative and fearless, like he has nothing to hide, and then in the end he doesn't produce information.
So we
and
can bring it
his
down.
White House pretty much.
So as you can see, it's a mix of panning on still images, there's some video footage, some of it is pool and stock footage, some of it are things that we actually have been taking. And we kind of mix it in to give folks a little bit of sense of, what's happening, kind of a way to glance at a screen and re-engage in the content. It definitely functions as a secondary screen experience, and much of that is just layered on top of the newscast as it goes out over the air. Though at the beginning, this first, what we call topper, is recorded expressly for the visual newscast. So it's kind of a combination of a little bit of bespoke header, the newscast that goes out over our broadcast stations, with some visuals added, and we make those available on smart speakers during morning drive. We are continuing to think about how best to expand our visual presence, but visuals is really only one of the things we had to grapple with as we really try to reinvent radio. The other one is interactivity. Smart speakers really invite this interactivity, even more so than a mobile phone where you kind of click on things. You're talking to it and you sort of expect it to respond back. But that gets a little tricky when you're talking about news, because the news involves names and places and novel concepts that didn't exist necessarily a day ago, a week ago, even a month ago. So getting the devices to be able to do the natural language processing needed to respond to things about the news was something that had us a little worried. So we wanted to experiment with it. And we also wanted to create something that was kind of fun for our listeners and our users. And so it got us thinking about quizzes. We're really well known for a quiz show we produce on the weekends called Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. It's actually one of our most popular radio programs and an extremely popular podcast that we produce. So it got us thinking like, hey, here's a way we could create something kind of fun for our audience that's going to help us understand interactivity and help us grapple a little bit with the natural language processing capabilities of smart speakers. So we did a Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me news quiz. I'm going to play a little bit of it. I apologize. The audio is awful, which is embarrassing from an audio company, but it'll give you a sense that of how the quiz works and the fact that we're actually using the cast of the quiz to ask the questions and respond to the answers that the player gives.
Hey y'all, I'm NPR's Sam Sanders, and I'm here today to play Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me's new quiz for smart speakers.
In February, Boston Dynamics made everybody a little nervous with footage of a robot that could open blank.
A door.
That's right, it opens doors. Uh-oh. In August, a group of planetary researchers released a paper saying that blank should be reclassified as a planet.
Pluto.
That's right, Pluto.
So this helped us understand, how good was the technology at understanding an answer somebody gave, particularly when it's about something that just popped into the news maybe a couple days before. It helped us learn how to create something interactive where there's different paths and different things people could say and different responses that needed to be given back. So we learned a lot, and we're trying to figure out what more we might want to do with quizzes. And we're still trying to figure out, how much further do we go with visuals, and what more can we do with the NPR One infrastructure to provide on-demand, the on-demand news people are looking for across a whole variety of different platforms. So we're really thinking about what more we want to do in this space as we're working to reinvent radio. Obviously, there are many directions we and any broadcaster could go in a world where audio is having another golden age. We really focused on how we could do more with things we were already doing, like NPR One, or how we can make more out of things we're really known for, like our newscasts, or shows like Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And how can we really build on what really is our core strength, which is audio storytelling? And that's really been evidenced by our success in the podcasting sphere. And how can we extend that as we reinvent radio across a number of different platforms? And this is really the big thing that I recommend to everybody who's thinking about how do you reinvent yourself as technology changes and pops up. And my answer to that is really think about what is your organization truly about at its core? What does your audience rely on you for? What do they know you for? And really build on those core strengths and that core commitment you have and that core relationship that you have with your audience. It's really easy to go chasing after some shiny thing that a new piece of technology could do. But we're really finding that the more we hone in on our core, the more success we find. Now, we don't know where technology is going to take us next. We've long used the art of audio storytelling to inform people about the world they live in and to entertain them with great stories. And we've always done that using the human voice because that creates this sense of, human connection and community, and that's something we really value. Like every other media outlet out there, we definitely do multi-platform journalism. You kind of have to. But audio is our specialty, and we've really been actively seeking every single opportunity we have as new technologies come on the market to ensure that our audience can find us and hear us in easy, engaging ways across all of the different platforms they use as they go about their lives. And there was a time where we were probably worried, back in some of the early technological shifts, that audio was going to go the way of the dinosaur. But it's been really exciting to be working in this industry at a moment where audio is truly having a golden age and showing up in more places in people's lives. Thank you.